B'siyata d'shmai, we're going to learn Beitza Daf. Hey, we're going to start 3 lines from the bottom of Daf Daled Omid Beis. We saw in the previous Gemara on Daf Daled that Rav has 3 halachas. 3 times he discusses the influence that one day has on another day. The first one we saw in Daf Daled Omid Aleph, and that is when you have Shabbos and Yom Tov next to each other, do we view them as one long continuity and a single kedusha? In which case a Beitza Shenolda B'zeh is Asura B'zeh. Or do we say no, each day is independent and the Issa was only on the day that it was laid and not the next day, and therefore Nolda B'zeh Muteres B'zeh. Rabbi Yochanan is Mekel, Rav was Machmir, and Rav paskined like Rav. On Daf Daled Omid Beis we saw a second halacha, and that is when you have 2 days of Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz, are they considered a single long day, or do we view them as one day? In which case, Beitza Shenolda B'zeh, Asura B'zeh, or not. Over there, Rav was Mekel. He says Nolda B'zeh, Muteres B'zeh, and Rav paskined like Rav. And now we're going to learn the third halacha of Rav. Itmar Shnei Yomim Tovim Shel Rosh Hashanah. We know that Rosh Hashanah, there almost everywhere, we'll discuss the details in a couple of moments, but Rosh Hashanah was very different to the other Yomim Tovim. The other Yomim Tovim, how did it work? In the Beis Din, in Yerushalayim, the Beis Din, they would be Mekadesh the Chodesh, they would determine what day was Aleph of the Chodesh, what day was the first day, and then one would know when the 15th is, when Pesach is, when Sukkot is, when any Yom Tov is. Now, on Rosh Hashanah it was a problem, because if there was, the day of Rosh Chodesh is Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the first of Tishri. So if the Eidim would come, the witnesses would come and say, we saw the new moon, and therefore what would have been the 30th day of Elul is now really the first day of Tishri, here and now it's Rosh Hashanah. Which means that any given year, even before they knew whether Rosh Hashanah would be on the 30th day of Elul or on the 31st day, so to speak, that means after 29 days of Elul or after 30 days of Elul, the night of the 30th, they always had to practice Rosh Hashanah, and in case the next day witnesses would come and determine that that day was Rosh Hashanah, that day was Rosh Hashanah. If witnesses didn't come that day, then by default, the next day is Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Chodesh must be either on day 30 or on day 31. So any given year, so if Eidim came midday on, let's call it the 30th of Elul, midday the Eidim came, then it became clear that that day was Rosh Hashanah. They would then practice Rosh Hashanah until the end of the day, and that's it. The next day is just Beis Tishri, it's not Yom Tov at all. If Eidim, were we to know that Eidim were not going to come on the 30th, then we would know that the 30th is just the 30th of Elul, it's not Rosh Hashanah. The next day is Rosh Hashanah. But because it was here and now, there was no time for agents to go around and tell people from far and near, it's Rosh Chodesh, it's Rosh Hashanah today. And therefore in almost everywhere, even in Eretz Yisrael, even close to the Beis Din, they didn't know when Rosh Hashanah was, and therefore even today it's like that as well. Even here in Eretz Yisrael, there is 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Tomorrow is going to discuss these 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Are they considered as one long day? And so to speak, it's a first of Tishri of 48 hours, so to speak. Of course, it's really 2 days. A day is only 24 hours, but it's considered a single long day. And then coming back to Beitza Shenolda B'Yom Tov, it will be Noilad B'zeh, Asura B'zeh. Or do we say no, each day is independent, and whichever way you hold it, only one of the days is really the real Rosh Hashanah, you just don't know which one. It's a suffix, but not both. And therefore, Nolda B'zeh, Muteres B'zeh. That's going to be the discussion now. Itmar Shnei Yomim Tovim Shel Rosh Hashanah. Rav Shmuel D'Omer Tarvayu, they both said Nolda B'zeh, Asura B'zeh. It's considered as if it's a one long day. Ditnan. Proof to that is from the Mishnah. At first, At first, then they would receive the witnesses that would determine that that day is Rosh Hashanah, is Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Hashanah. They would receive these Eidim any time of the day, even if they come an hour before the end of the day, in which case only right at the end of the day it will become clear that that day was Rosh Hashanah. They were practicing just in case. They were practicing Rosh Hashanah from the previous night, but it would only become determined that it actually is Rosh Hashanah that day. then they would receive the Eidim all day, and that was that. At one point, at one point, indeed, the witnesses would come and say, "We saw the new moon last night." For some reason, it took them all day to get there, all night and all day. They only got there to give their testimony very shortly before the end of the day. Now, the Leviim in the Beis Hamikdash, when they were shechting the Korban Tomid, all the while that the Eidim were not there, they would assume since it hasn't yet been Niskadish HaChodesh, it's still considered a weekday, and therefore the song that they would sing with the Korban Tomid would be the song of the weekday. And indeed, the Korban Tomid Shel Shachar that was brought every morning, early in the morning, since most years the Eidim wouldn't come at that early, they would only come later on in the day, the shir of the Korban Tomid Shel Shachar of the 30th of Elul was always the shir, the song of the weekday. However, when it comes to the Korban Tomid Shel Bein Ha'arbaim, over there, many years, the Eidim would have come early on, they would have said it's Rosh Chodesh and therefore Rosh Hashanah, and the shir, the song they would sing for the Korban Tomid of the afternoon would be the Rosh Hashanah shir, not the weekday shir. So this year, what happened was the Eidim came very late, after the Kohanim had already brought the Korban Tomid Shel Bein Ha'arbaim, v'niskalkelu hanuvim b'shir, and then things went wrong. They ended up saying the shir of the weekday because the Eidim hadn't come yet, and really the Korban Tomid Shel Bein Ha'arbaim, in the event that it is Rosh Hashanah, has to be a Rosh Hashanah shir, not a weekday shir. And therefore, iskinu, they made the takana shelo yiu mekablim es ha'eidim elo ad hamincha. Only till the time when one would bring the Korban Tomid of the afternoon Korban Tomid Shel Bein Ha'arbaim, only till then they would receive the Eidim for the Chodesh. If the Eidim would not come before the time of Mincha, then that's it. Even if the Eidim come, we're not listening to your Eidus. We know it might well be that it is Rosh Hashanah today. We're not going to hear it, we're not going to be Mekadosh the Chodesh, and tomorrow is going to be the Rosh Hashanah. Ve'im bo'u Eidim min ha'mincha l'mayla, then noyagim oisei kodesh u'lemochar kodesh. This is a tremendous chiddush, it says in the Mishnah, that even though it's come to mincha time, and it's clear to everybody, from this point on, we are not receiving any more the Eidim. Tomorrow is going to be Rosh Hashanah. Nonetheless, the end of today, the last hours of this 30th of Elul, we're going to continue practicing as if it's Rosh Hashanah. They wouldn't say the shir of Rosh Hashanah, but all the halachas of Yom Tov, they would continue practicing. And it's a big question, why should that be the truth? And so what do we see from here? We see from here that when the Chachomim said that on Rosh Hashanah, because you don't know exactly when the Eidim are going to come, practice Rosh Hashanah for 2 days, they didn't say, well, it's a Sophic this day, Sophic that day, just do what you have to do in the case of Sophic. Because if so, the last couple of hours of that first day is definitely not Rosh Hashanah. If the Eidim didn't come, then why can't we just do melachos? Why can't we just act as if it's a regular weekday? So it must be that when the Chachomim said that you should practice 2 days, they meant that we are making a takona that it should be a long 48-hour day of Rosh Hashanah. And it doesn't matter if the Eidim come or not. Practice Rosh Hashanah for 48 hours, not one of 2 days and maybe both if you have a doubt. No. We're telling you both days are, so to speak, a single day of Rosh Hashanah. So, and that is what Rav Shmuel said, that since we see that even once it becomes clear that the Eidim are not coming on that first day, we still have to practice Yom Tov. It's not just because you had a Safek, and therefore, Noel do Bazeh, Asura Bazeh. However, it's important to mention that this takona of see 2 days of Rosh Hashanah as a single day, that's not true in an absolute way. That means in the event that the Eidim came earlier on that first day, on the 30th of Elul, then we would say no, only this first day is Rosh Hashanah, the next day is not Rosh Hashanah. But only places that were too far away that they wouldn't hear when it's Rosh Hashanah, and therefore they had to practice 2 days, or even in the Beis Din, in the event that the Eidim didn't come in a mincha l'mayla, in those cases the Chachomim said it's a one long 2 day of Rosh Hashanah, and Noel de Bazeh, Asura Bazeh. Continues the Gemara, Omar Rabba. Rabba said, Mitakonas Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai ve'elech Beitza muteres. Rabbi said something very interesting. He says all this was true, that initially they would receive the Eidus all day. Something went wrong, that the Eidim came too late, and then they said the Shira of the Chayil instead of the Yom Tov, and therefore they said, Mincha l'mayla, we're not receiving the Eidim. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, what did he do? He was there after the Churban Beis HaMikdash. After the Churban Beis HaMikdash, they no longer brought the Korban Tomid, they no longer had a Shir of Korban Tomid, they no longer had what could go wrong by receiving the Eidim, even after the Mincha time. Even though the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, they were still being Mekadosh the Chodesh with Re'iyah, with Eidim. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said that we can receive the Eidim right to the end of the day. So what does Rabbi say? Since we can now receive the Eidim right to the end of the day, then we no longer have to say that even though we know on a 100% level that it's not Rosh Hashanah, really, that means as far as the sfeikas, the doubts are concerned, it's not Rosh Hashanah, because we know we're not receiving Eidim, nonetheless practice Rosh Hashanah because it's one long Kedusha. No, all that is not necessary anymore. It could be that from Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and on, the only time you have to practice Rosh Hashanah is when you have a doubt that maybe it is Rosh Hashanah. And therefore, it's always going to be either one day or the next day. Therefore, says Rabbi, that Noel de Bezeh, Muteres Bezeh. So even though it could be that they had to be machmir on the first day because they didn't know if Eidim would later come, that's okay, but it's only misofik. And he didn't come, if the Eidim didn't come the first day, the next day is Rosh Hashanah. You have to practice Rosh Hashanah then. But since there's no point in time where the sofik has been verified, and nonetheless you have to keep the Rosh Hashanah, and that would tell us that there's a gzeira of Chod Kedusha, of a single Kedusha, a Yom Aricha, a long day of 48 hours, you don't have that proof anymore, and therefore it's considered as two separate days, Noel de Bezeh, Muteres Bezeh. That's what Rabbi says, Ditnan. We learned in the Mishnah, Mishachorav Beis HaMikdash, after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, Hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Shiu Mekablim Eidus HaChodesh Kol Hayom. Since there's no longer an issue with the Korban Tomid Shel Ben Arbaim, we're going back to the original practice of receiving Eidim any point till the end of the day. Omar le Abaye. So Abaye said to Rabbi, V'harav Shmuel d'Omer Tarvayu Beitza Asura. Did Rav and Shmuel not say that the Noel do Bezeh Asura Bezeh? And Rav and Shmuel, they were after the Churban Beis HaMikdash, so they also knew that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, we assume they knew that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said that you can now receive the Eidim later. So why are they saying Noel de Bezeh Asura Bezeh? Omar le. So Rabbi answered back to Abaya, Amina lecha ano Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Says, I don't understand. I'm telling you, says Rabbi, I told you that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he changed that. The only reason that they said Noel de Bezeh Asura Bezeh is because we have proof that it's one long day. What was the proof? From the fact that the last couple of hours, Min HaMincha L'mayla of the first day, was definitely not Rosh Hashanah. Nonetheless, Ne'agin Oisayim Kodesh, the whole day is Kodesh. It must be the Chachomim made a Gzeira, a 2-day Rosh Hashanah, irrespective of the Sofik. And since we don't have that anymore after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, we revert back to the fact that you only practice Rosh Hashanah misofik. So Noel de Bezeh Muteres Bezeh. Vat omrasli Rav and Shmuel, and you're asking me a question. You Abaya, you're asking me, but Rav and Shmuel. I quoted to you Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Says the Gemara, Rav and Shmuel kosher masnisin. Okay, how is Rav and Shmuel going to understand that Mishnah? According to Rav and Shmuel, where Rav and Shmuel said that Noel de Bezeh Asura Bezeh, why should that be true? Did we not say in the Mishnah that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai reinstated that you can receive the Eidim even after Min HaMincha L'mayla? Answers the Gemara, Lo kashya ha'alon ha'lahu. It depends who you're talking about. For the people in Eretz Yisrael, for them, they only keep one day. If the Eidim would come on the first day, then there would be just the first day. And therefore the people in Eretz Yisrael, if and when you have to keep 2 days, it's considered only misafik, and therefore Noel de Bezeh Muteres Bezeh. However, in Chutz La'aretz, ever since the day go, right from the beginning, there was never a stop in that. They always had to keep 2 days, because it was too far away. The Eidim couldn't get to them. So since they were always keeping 2 days from that point in time where the Chachomim initially said, always keep 2 days as if it's one long day, from the time before Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, so in Chutz La'aretz that didn't change. They continued keeping 2 days all along because it was Chutz La'aretz. And therefore, for them it remained as the original takana of a long day of 48 hours, and therefore Noel de Bezeh, Asura Bezeh. However, in Eretz Yisrael, where the only time that we had this Gezerah, that even though there's no Sofik, you have to be Machmir, was only after the Gezerah, and after there was an issue with the Eidim coming late, that they said don't receive the Eidim, but nonetheless practice Yom Tov. Then the Chachomim said practice Yom Tov because we're instating a 2-day Yom Tov, so to speak, a long day of 48 hours. However, after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, we're back to where we were lekatchila, that Rosh Hashanah could be one day, could be, we don't know which day, so sometimes misofik we have to be machmir, but in that case, Noel do Bezeh, Muteres Bezeh. So that was Rabbi. Rabbi said that mitakonos Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai ve'elech beitza muteres. Rav Yosef Omar. Rav Yosef says, af mitakonos Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai ve'elech, even after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said that we can receive Eidim even after Mincha, beitza asura. Nonetheless, even though we don't anymore have the reason to believe that it's one long day, we don't change from what was before that. And since before Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, we see the 2 days as being one long day, therefore even after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, it stayed that way. And if it's one long day, Noel de Bezeh, Asur Bezeh. My Tama, why would that be true? Because have a Dover Shebeminyan. Because who said that initially, even though it's Minamin Cholamayla, and we know 100% we're not going to make this Rosh Hashanah, nonetheless keep the Kedusha, as we saw before, Minamin Cholamayla, Noegin Oisei Hayom Kodesh. And that was the proof that it was one long day, not only because of Sofik, it's just a long 48-hour day called Rosh Hashanah. That was the Chachomim, they voted on that, they all got together, it was called a Dover Shebeminyan. It's something that was established with a group of Chachomim that voted that in, they counted each other, and they made this takana. And the rule is, anything that was made, any takana that was made that way, can only be undone if you have a minyan, if you have, again, a Beis Din that come and sit, and they unanimously agree to undo the original takana. And that seems that didn't happen here. V'chol dover shebeminyan, anything that was instated with a minyan, tzorich minyan acher latira, you need a Beis Din to sit down, to come together and to undo it. And that didn't happen. And therefore, even though Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says that you can receive the Eidim, all the while a Beis Din don't sit and officially undo that takana of a 48-hour day, Rosh Hashanah, then we continue with that. And therefore, Noel de Bezu, Asura Bezu. Omer Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, where do I know this from, that anything that was instated in a certain event and situation can only be undone in a similar circumstance? Dichsiv. And now Rav Yosef is going to bring us a string of psukim and sources, and the Gemara is then going to have to explain where you're going to, where you're coming from, like why do we need so many psukim, what's going on. But let's first read what he said. He brings one pasuk that says, Leich emor lahem, Hashem told Moshe, go and tell Klal Yisrael after Matan Torah, Shuvu lochem lo aleichem, you can go back to your tents, you can go back to your homes. Because initially they had to separate from their wives, and here Hashem was giving them permission to go back to be with their wives. V'oimer, another pasuk, and another pasuk that says, B'mashoich hayovel heimo yalu bahor, which means that when you hear the sound of the shofar sounding after Matan Torah, at that point you can go back out, you can go up on the mountain. Till then, not. V'tanya, and we learned in another Mishnah, Kerem Ravai, we know that the fourth year in a vineyard is called Kerem Ravai, and the halacha is you have to take the fruits of the vineyard and you have to eat them in Yerushalayim b'kedusha like Ma'aser Sheni. So Hoya Oile Yerushalayim Mahalech Yom Echad L'Kol Tzad. a day's trip around Yerushalayim, anyone that was within that diameter of a day's walk or traveling to Yerushalayim was not allowed to sell, because normally in Masechet, if it's too far from Yerushalayim to take the fruits to Yerushalayim, you could actually redeem them. You could sell them and take the money to Yerushalayim and buy food items with it. The same with Kerem Ravai, but the Chachomim made a Gzeira. Within a day's distance from Yerushalayim, you're not allowed to do that. You have to take the trouble of bringing the fruits in fruit form to Yerushalayim. You cannot redeem them. V'zuhi tchuma. And what is the tchum? What are the boundaries of a day's travel from Yerushalayim? Ilas min Hatzofa, in a place called Ilas in the north, Va'akravas min Adorim in the south, Lud min Hamayriv in the west, and V'Yarden min Hamizrach, and in the east you had the Yarden. V'Oma Ula v'Itema Rabbi Bar Bar Chana, Rabbi Yochanan. Ma'atam, why did the Chachomim make this Gezerah? They wanted to beautify and adorn the marketplaces of Yerushalayim with many fruits, and therefore they encouraged people to come and bring the fruits themselves to Yerushalayim, not just to redeem them and to transfer the Kedusha onto coins, bring the coins, and then buy the fruits that were in Yerushalayim already. No, we want many more fruits that will help to keep the prices down in Yerushalayim of the fruits, and therefore bring the fruits themselves to Yerushalayim. V'tanya, we learned in a brayso, Kerem Ravai hoyoloi Rabbi Eliezer b'mizrach Lud. Rabbi Eliezer had some of this 4th year kerem from the vineyard for Rabbi Eliezer in the Mizrach, in the east of Lud, and we said that Lud was the Ma'ariv most point, which is within a day's travel to Yerushalayim, which means that Lud was clearly within that parameter of being close to Yerushalayim. B'tzad Kfar Tovi, on the side of the Kfar Tovi, and he wanted to be mafkir for the anim. He wanted to say, I haven't got the keichos to go up to Yerushalayim with them. I'm just going to make it hefka, because I'm not allowed to redeem them. It's too close to Yerushalayim. They have to go to Yerushalayim. What I'll do is I'll deem them ownerless, and the poor people can come and take it up to Yerushalayim and eat it in Yerushalayim. Omroi Talmidov. So the Talmidim of Rabbi Eliezer told him, Rabbi, our master, Kvar nimnu olecha chaveirecha. We're talking here about after the Churban Beis Hamikdash and Yerushalayim. There were no longer many Yidden living in Yerushalayim. There were no more marketplaces in Yerushalayim to adorn. Nonetheless, they told him that you're right. That even though the Gezerah doesn't really apply anymore, nonetheless, you're not allowed to sell them. You're not allowed to redeem those fruits and transfer the Kedusha onto money. However, your colleagues, your friends actually sat together as a Beis Din, and they officially undid that Gezerah. And they now allowed you to transfer the Kedusha of the fruits onto coins, even though you're that close to Yerushalayim. So what do we see from here? That they made it clear that the only reason Rabbi Eliezer was allowed to transfer the Kedusha onto coins was only because Kvar nimnu olecha chaverecha. Had not been Kvar nimnu chaverecha, it would have been Osa. Man chaverecha. Who are these colleagues who did this? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai with the other Chachomim sat together and officially undid that Gezerah. And therefore he was allowed to transfer the Kedusha onto the coins. Taima, the whole reason is denimnu. That's why it was mutter. Ha'loi nimnu. But had they not sat together and decided as a Beis Din to undo that takana, lo, it would have been osa, even though the reason behind the takana wouldn't apply anymore. Nonetheless, it's osa. And we have to learn how to apply that to us here as well. Rav Yosef says that even though before Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, there's reason to believe that Rosh Hashanah was one long day, because they would not receive Eidus from Mincha L'mayla, and nonetheless, the end of that day is still Kodesh. It must be that the Chachomim said, make it one long day. And now, after the Churban Beis Hamikdash, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said there's no longer a reason that we should not receive the Eidim even later in the day. From that point on, there's no longer reason to believe and to assume that the Rosh Hashanah is one long day of 2 days. It could just be either this day or that day, depending on the amount of information you have. Nonetheless, since they didn't officially sit down and undo that Gezerah, Therefore, says Rav Yosef, noilda bezu, asura bezu. That is what Rav Yosef said, and he brought proof that something that was established with a minyan has to be undone only with a minyan, and cannot get undone by virtue of the fact that circumstances dictate that the gzeira is no longer necessary. And now the Gemara is explaining my v'oimer. When Rav Yosef wanted to show us this concept and to prove to us that kol davar shebeminyan tzorich minyan acher latiroi, he quoted to us three sources. Number one, the pasuk of shuvu lochem lo aleichem. Another one, b'mshei chayovel hemo yalu bahar, and kerem revai. That from these three, between these three, we see that davar shebeminyan, anything that was instated with a davar shebeminyan, with a group of chachomim together, unanimously decreeing something, has to be undone only with such a circumstance. And let's first learn and understand each one of these three sources individually. The last one we saw, Kerem Ravai, we saw the Chachomim said that within the circumference of a day from Yerushalayim, you're not allowed to transfer the Kedusha of the Kerem Ravai onto coins. And then we said that it's clear from here, from the whole Brisa there with Rabbi Eliezer, that it was the only reason that got undone was because they were nimnu, because they sat as a Beis Din and undid that. Even though the circumstances no longer required them to have such a Gezerah, it wasn't good enough. So that's a source that anything called Davar Shebeminyan Tzarech Minyan Acher Latiroi. That was self-explanatory. What's with these psukim? Hashem said, don't go up onto the... Hashem says, for the 3 days before Matan Torah, separate from your wives till Matan Torah. So it would be self-understood that as soon as Matan Torah is over, they were allowed to go back and have relations with their wife. Why not? Nonetheless, Shuvu lochem lo aleichem. Hashem had to give a special instruction, go back, you can go back into your tents and have relations with your wives. And why would that be? Why can't we just understand on our own that since the whole Hashem said 3 days before Matan Torah, separate from your wives, we can take it for granted after Matan Torah we can go back? No. Because since Hashem explicitly said, separate from your wives, it's comparable somewhat to a davar shebeminyan, so you're only allowed to reverse that, so to speak, only when Hashem tells you explicitly, now you can go back. Don't understand from the circumstances that the original Gzeira, Takona, doesn't apply. No. That's one source. There's another source, and that is Hashem said that all the while the Shekhinah is on the mountain, don't climb up the mountain. So it should be self-understood that as soon as Matan Torah is over and the Shekhinah is no longer there, that you can go up. Why did Hashem have to say explicitly, now you have permission to go back up on the mountain? So it's another source that because it was Hashem that explicitly said, don't go up on the mountain, even though circumstances dictate that would no longer apply, you cannot undo that until Hashem explicitly says, you can go up. So these are the three sources, and we have to understand, why do you need three sources? The Gemara is going to tell us how the first two sources are somewhat limited. The first one, Shuvu lochem lo aleichem, might not even be talking about permission to go back to have relations with their wives. It might have been a requirement and a chiyuv to have relations with their wives. She'er ksus v'oino lo sigra. In which case, since it's telling you what you have to do, not what you're allowed to do, then it's got no connection to the original takona of separating from their wives. And therefore that wouldn't be a source. The second source where he brings B'mshei chayovel hemo yalu bahar, that is Hashem speaking, and we might think when Hashem said, don't go up the mountain, that's like min haTorah, so to speak, then you need Hashem to say, now you can go up. But maybe when the Chachomim make a Gzeira, that wouldn't apply. Maybe when the Chachomim make a Gzeira, as soon as the Gzeira is no longer necessary, it automatically gets undone. That's why we have Kerem Revai, which was only a Gzeira d'Rabbanon, that within this a parameter of a day's journey from Yerushalayim, you're not allowed to sell the fruits and bring the coins to Yerushalayim. It was a Gzeira d'Rabbanon, maybe there. You don't need a minyan to sit together, a Beis Din to sit together and undo that. That's why we have Kerem Revai to say that even midrabanon, if it was the Gzeira was made with an established Beis Din who decided that way, you need to have an established Beis Din to undo that. Let's see all this inside. Mai v'omer, says the Gemara Hocha Komer. It said explicitly in the pasuk, separate from your wives for 3 days. Don't have relations with your wives because of Matan Torah. So leichem olem shuv lochem lo leichem lomoli. Why does Hashem have to say now you can, after Matan Torah you can go back to your wives? Shma mino, that's the first source that kol dover shebeminyan tzarich minyan acher la'atirei. V'chitema, are you going to say that pasuk is not telling me that you're allowed to go back, and it would be self-understood you're allowed to go back? What the pasuk is coming to impress on us is lemitzvahs oina, that you have to have relations with your wife when the time of oina is. Lemitzvahs oina u'da'asa. That's why I'm bringing you another source. Tashema b'msheicha yovel hema yalu bahar. The pasuk says that when the shofar blows, when you hear the sound of the yovel, then you can go up the mountain. Does it not say that you're only not allowed to go up the mountain when it's mul hahorahu, when it's that mountain with the whole splendor of the Shekhinah around that mountain? But as soon as the mountain is not that same situation anymore, when the Shekhinah is not there anymore, that you are allowed to go up. It's self-understood. Why do I need a pasuk to tell me explicitly you can go up? And are you going to suggest that's only when Hashem is explicitly saying don't go up the mountain, don't have relations with your wives, but when the Chachamim make a gzeira, loy. And then the same would apply here with the Beitza, which is only an Issa d'Rabbanon, that the Beitza, which is Noilad B'zeh, would be Osur B'zeh, because the 2 days is a single day. And maybe as soon as that doesn't apply anymore, then we don't need a Beis Din, a minyan, to undo that. Toshema Kerem Ravai. That's why I'm bringing you the whole incident with Kerem Ravai. V'ha Kerem Ravai d'Rabbanon, because the Kerem Ravai, the Gezerah, not to sell the fruits and take the money up to Yerushalayim, is only d'Rabbanon. And nonetheless, they told Rabbi Eliezer, Kvar nimnu alecha chavirecha v'itiru. It's only because they established a Beis Din and they said that no longer are you not allowed to sell the fruits. Only because of that you can sell the fruits. But by virtue of the fact that the Gezerah doesn't apply anymore because the Yidden are not in Yerushalayim anymore because it's after the Churban, that would not have been enough to allow us to sell the fruits. Asks the Gemara, we've got a very good question now. What did Rav Yosef say? Rav Yosef says that Af mitakonos Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai ve'elech, the Beitza is asura. Why? Because when did we initially say that the Beis Din, the egg, Masha Noilad B'zeh Asura B'zeh, that's only in the time where even in Yerushalayim, even in the Beis Din itself, when there was no doubt, they kept 2 days. When Min HaMincha L'mayla, when it was clear to them that this is not going to be Rosh Hashanah, nonetheless, Ne'agin Oisayim Kodesh. It's so that even in the Beis Din, they had a concept of 2 days. That was a Gzeres Chachomim. But then when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, no, from now on, we can receive the Eidim even after the time of Mincha, because there's no more Korbanos to get messed up. You can receive them, in which case they would never had a definite 2 days. It's either we kept the first day because we don't know, but even if the Eidim came a few minutes before the end of the day and said today is Rosh Hashanah, then tomorrow's not going to be Rosh Hashanah. So they never had 2 days with knowledge that 1 day is not Rosh Hashanah. There was either misofik or it was just 1 day, not like before Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So the Gemara is saying, so you see Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, from now on you can receive Eidim. So the Gemara is now asking that on Rav Yosef, when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said that you can receive the Eidim even after the time of Mincha, for all intents and purposes, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai he made the Beis Din, and the Beis Din established that there's no longer a time that the Beis Din have to keep 2 days, even though I don't have a suffix. Is that not called an imnu, an establishment of a Beis Din that would allow us now to undo the original Gezerah and Masha Noilad B'zeh Muteres B'zeh? That's what the Gemara is asking against Rav Yosef. And allowed it the next day because it's 2 separate days. We no longer have to say that the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah is 1 day. Answer the Gemara, no. Ki imnu edus. They did sit together and make a decision. But what was their decision? The decision wasn't that an egg that was laid on the first day is going to be mutter on the second day. What they said, they sat down to say that from now on, there's no Beis Din and there's no Beis Hamikdash and Korbanos to get messed up, and therefore you can receive the Eidim even at the end of the day. But they never sat down and undid that Gezerah that Mashanoilad Bazeh, Asura Bazeh. Abaya didn't like that. Omale Abaya said, I don't understand. They never made a Gezerah that Mashanoilad Bazeh, Asura Bazeh. All they made a Gezerah Lekatchila was, we're not receiving Eidim anymore after Mincha. And by default, the Mishnah said that nonetheless it stays Rosh Hashanah even though you're not going to receive Eidim. There's no doubt anymore that the first day is not Rosh Hashanah. It must be that the Chachomim at that point decreed that it's one long day. And consequent to that Gezerah, Noilad Bazeh, Asura Bazeh. But they never made the Gezerah on the eggs. They only made the Gezerah on the Eidim. And as soon as Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai with his Chaverim undid that Gezerah as a Beis Din, then automatically the Gezerah of the Mashanoilad Bazeh, Asura Bazeh falls away. Otu Beitza B'minyan Mihavi, Beitza Be'edus Tali Milsa. The halacha of the egg, Mashanoilad Bazeh, Asura Bazeh, is dependent and consequent to the fact that you are not going to receive the Eidim Minamin Cholamayla. And nonetheless, you're going to practice Rosh Hashanah. So it must be that it's one long day of 48 hours. Itzar Eidus, Itzar Beitza. Consequent to the fact that you're not going to take Eidim Minamin Cholamayla, Mamela, the egg laid on the first day remains also on the second day. Ishtari Eidos, but as soon as you allow them to receive Eidim on the first day, which means that in the Beis Din they will never have 2 days in a case where it's not Suffolk. So there's never a case where you have to say it's a long 2-day Rosh Hashanah. Ishtari Beitza. Automatically the egg is going to become mutter. Mashanoilad Bazeh, muteres Bazeh. So that was Abaya arguing with Rav Yosef. Continues the Gemara. Rav Ada v'Rav Salman tarvayu mibei Kluchis. They both came from Kluchis. And Omri, they said, Af mitakonos Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai ve'elach, even after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said that you're allowed to receive Eidim min amincho l'maylo, beitza asura. Bashanoilad bazeh, asura bazeh. My tama, what's the reason? Not for the reason Rav Yosef said that since it was instated with the Davar Shebaminyan, you can only undo it with the Davar Shebaminyan. He says another reason. He says, my tama, mehiro yibone hamikdosh. Mirz Hashem, the Beis Hamikdash is going to be built. And in the event that Mashanoilad Bazeh Muteres Bazeh, in the event that you're going to say that since the time now in the Churban, there's no problem with the Korbanos getting messed up, and therefore we receive the Eidim Minamin Cholamayla, therefore the 2 days are now independent of each other. There's no case where without Suffolk we keep 2 days. So one day it's separate. Each day is separate, and you just do what you have to do, Misofik. Then therefore, Mashanoilad Bazeh Muteres Bazeh. Suddenly the Beis Hamikdash is going to be built, and people are going to remember, and they're going to say, just a minute, last year Mashanoilad Bazeh Muteres Bazeh. This year also Mashanoilad Bazeh Muteres Bazeh. And this is going to be a mistake, because this year we have a Beis Hamikdash, and this year we're not going to receive Eidim Min Amin Cholamayla, because Min Amin Cholamayla will mess up the Korban. And therefore, in the Beis Hamikdash, even though we're not going to receive the Eidim Min Amin Cholamayla, and we know it's not from the time of Min Cholamayla, it will be clear to us it's not Rosh Hashanah on the 30th of Elul, nonetheless we'll practice Rosh Hashanah, and that Gezerah will come back, that it's a long 48-hour Rosh Hashanah, and Mashanoilad Bazeh Asura Bazeh. But you won't remember that, because last year Mashanoilad Bazeh Muteres Bazeh. People will say that last year, did we not eat an egg that was laid on the first day on the second day? Now also we can eat. They won't remember that last year the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah were independent of each other, and only one day is a Vadai Rosh Hashanah, not 2 days. But now that we have a Beis Hamikdash, and we're not going to receive Eidim Min Amin Cholamayla, and nonetheless Min Amin Cholamayla will be considered Rosh Hashanah, so that means it's not 2 Kedushas, it's 1 Kedusha, Kedusha Achasi, and Mashanoilad Bazeh Asura Bazeh. So to avoid such an issue, we're going to say that even in the Golus, Mashanoilad Bazeh Asura Bazeh. Asks the Gemara, if you're worried about Meheira Yibonei HaMikdash, how can you, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, say that now that we no longer have a Beis HaMikdash and we don't have a korban that can get messed up, you're going to receive Eidim even min Mincha L'Maylo? Why are you not afraid that Meheira Yibonei HaMikdash? Now this year, after the Churban, you're going to receive the Eidim even min Mincha L'Maylo. So next year, when we have a Beis HaMikdash, you're also going to receive the Eidim min Mincha L'Maylo. And that will be an issue, because if you receive the Eidim min Mincha L'Maylo, then you'll mess up the shir of the Korban Tomid Shel Bein Arbaim. And because the Eidim will say it's now Rosh Hashanah, and as we said at the beginning of Daf Yomi Shiur, that even though the morning of the 30th of Elul, which in most years was a weekday, was not yet determined it was Rosh Hashanah, they said the song of the weekday, but in the afternoon, you have to say the song of Rosh Hashanah if it's Rosh Hashanah. If you're going to receive Eidim min Mincha L'Maylo, you will have messed up the shir of the Korban Tomid Shel Bein Arbaim. And people are not going to remember, and they're not going to know that last year there was a Churban, and that's why we received the Eidim. This year we have Beis HaMikdash, and therefore we cannot receive the Eidim in Mincha L'Maylo. Ihochi Eidus Nami Lo Nekabil, Mai Tama Meheira Yibonei HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash might quickly get built, V'yomer, and people will say, Ishtaked last year, Milo Kibalnu Eidus HaChodesh Kol Hayom Kuloi. Last year did we not receive the Eidim all the way till the end of the day, as Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, Hashtanami Nekabel. Now also we can receive Eidim till the end of the day, and we'll have an issue with that. Answers the Gemara, no. Hochi Hashta. Hasam Eidus Masura LeBeizdin. Who receives Eidim? That's the Beizdin. Beizdin don't get confused. Beizdin will know that in time of Churban you can receive Eidim late, and in the time of Beis HaMikdash not. And therefore, as soon as the Beis HaMikdash is built, the Beizdin will know very well no more receiving Eidim min Mincha L'Maylo. But Beitza, the egg, L'Kol Masura. There's no Beis Din. There people will make a mistake. If you say with the egg that Noilad B'zeh Muteres B'zeh, the next year when the Beis HaMikdash is built, they'll say the same. And really in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, no. The Rosh Hashanah, since there's a point in time where we actually have 2 days Rosh Hashanah, even though there's no suffix, namely min Mincha L'Maylo. If the Eidim didn't come min Mincha L'Maylo, then min Mincha L'Maylo is now a first day Rosh Hashanah, even though there's no doubt there hasn't been yet a Kiddush HaChodesh, and the next day is the second day, so to speak. And therefore, since people won't know that, therefore, Beitza Shenoilda B'zeh is Asura B'zeh, even after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rava Omar, Af mitakonas Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai ve'elech Beitza Asura. Rava also says that even after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, when they will receive Eidim min Mincha L'Maylo, nonetheless, Mashenoilda B'zeh remains Asura B'zeh. Miloi Moida Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, she'im bo Eidim min Mincha L'Maylo, she'noegim oisei yom kodesh, u'lemochor kodesh. Let Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, him himself, let's say it's after the Churban Beis HaMikdash, the Eidim are going to come an hour before the end of the day, on the 30th of Elul. Then that day is now Rosh Hashanah. Is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai not agree that the next day is also going to be Rosh Hashanah? Why should the next day be Rosh Hashanah? It was already established the day before that it was Rosh Hashanah. So it must be that even after Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the 2 days are a single day, a 48-hour day of Rosh Hashanah. Even when there's no suffix, it's a single entity of a 48 hours, and therefore, Mashanoilad B'zeh, Asura B'zeh. So in the whole sugya till now we learned that according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, after the Churban, indeed if they received the Eidim any time on the 30th of Elul, that day is Rosh Hashanah, that next day is not Rosh Hashanah. Rava argued with that, and Rava said no. All Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said was, we now can receive the Eidim on the first day. But he himself didn't even intend to undo this point of you have to keep both days Yom Tov. You keep both days Yom Tov, it's Chod Kedusha, it's one Kedusha, and therefore Mashanoilad B'zeh, Asura B'zeh. V'omar Rava, we saw this at the beginning of the sugya already. We saw this on Daf Daled Amud Beis at the top, that Rava said, Hilchas Kavasei Rav Bahani Tlas. In all these 3 halachas, the first halacha we learnt about on Daf Daled Amud Aleph, Shabbos and Yom Tov next to each other, Rav said, Noildu B'zeh, Asura B'zeh, the halachas like Rav. The second halacha we saw in Daf Daled Amud Beis, Shnei Yomim Tovim Shel Goliyos, Rav Omar Noildu B'zeh, Muteres B'zeh. We paskin lekula like Rav. The third halacha we learned in today's daf, where it says there, Shnei Yomim Tovim Shalosh Hashana, Rav Shmuel, D'Omut Harvayu, Noilda B'zeh Asura B'zeh, which is the Chumrah, we paskin like Rav there as well. Hilchas Sekavasei Rav Bahanit Tlas, with these three halachas, the halacha is like Rav, Bein Lekula, one of the cases it's Lekula, Bein Lechumrah, and two of the cases it's Lechumrah. And in Yitzchok in the next year we're going to continue from here.